If you think this beef is just another old Dipset story, think again. What Joe Budden just revealed is not only shocking, it's the real reason Camron and Jim Jones' beef has never truly ended. And trust me, it's bigger than just music, social media, or old interviews. This isn't about old clips resurfacing or casual diss tracks. This is about years of loyalty, betrayal, and street politics that still influence every move they make today. From the outside, it might look like harmless drama, but the truth is far more complicated. Camron and Jim Jones aren't just feuding over music. This is about power, influence, and reputation, things that define their legacy and the future of Dipset itself. Budden dives deep into the reasons this feud keeps reigniting, exposing hidden alliances, grudges, and decisions that most fans don't even know about. Imagine being in a situation where every move is watched, every word analyzed, and every connection questioned. That's exactly what both Camron and Jim Jones are facing, and Budden doesn't hold back in revealing the harsh realities behind the scenes. He breaks down how old mistakes, unresolved tension, and ego clashes keep this beef alive, and why it's unlikely to die anytime soon. If you thought Dipset was over, Budden's take might change your entire perspective. In this video, we're going beyond the headlines, beyond social media rants, and straight into the real story behind one of hip-hop's longest-running conflicts. Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear isn't just drama. It's the truth that the streets and the industry have been watching for years. As soon as Joe Budden started speaking, the tension in the room was palpable. You could feel it even through the screen. This wasn't some casual commentary or a recap of old footage. This was Budden, unfiltered, peeling back layers of one of the most long-standing feuds in hip-hop history. The beef between Camron and Jim Jones is legendary, but Budden made it clear that it isn't just about old insults or public disagreements. People think this is about music.
It's not, Budden said.
This is about loyalty, reputation, and respect, and those things never go away once they're broken. To understand why this feud has lasted so long, you have to go back to the early days of Dipset. Camron, the visionary, pushing boundaries, creating a movement, while Jim Jones, loyal to the streets, protecting his lane, and holding his own ground. Their bond was strong, but so were the egos, and in hip-hop, egos are combustible. Over the years, small disagreements that might have been ignored in other crews turned into explosive public moments. From radio interviews to podcast debates, from studio conflicts to social media subtweets, each incident reignited the fire. Budden highlights that it wasn't just the obvious moments, but the unspoken tensions behind the scenes that created cracks in their relationship. It's easy to point at a single incident and say, this is where the beef started. But Budden insists it's cumulative. Years of subtle slights, miscommunications, and unacknowledged grievances built up like a powder keg. And once it reached a tipping point, every new interaction, no matter how small, had the potential to explode. Budden also points out that loyalty in Dipset has always been complicated. Jim Jones is intensely loyal to his crew, his friends, and the Harlem street code. Camron, on the other hand, has always been the visionary, the trendsetter, someone who sees the bigger picture. When those two forces collide, misalignment is inevitable. One of the key reasons Budden says this beef has never ended is mismanaged communication. In a world where every comment can go viral, where snippets of conversations can be twisted, every misstep gets magnified. A conversation that might have solved the problem becomes a headline, Budden notes. And once a headline spreads, the narrative takes on a life of its own, independent of what actually happened. Another point Budden emphasizes is the role of the streets and the fans. Camron and Jim Jones are not just artists, they're symbols. Fans take sides, social media inflates rumors, and even those outside the immediate conflict get involved. Budden says this external pressure feeds the cycle, keeping the beef alive even when the parties themselves might be trying to move on. Budden doesn't shy away from talking about ego clashes either. In hip-hop, ego isn't just pride, it's currency. Both Camron and Jim Jones have invested decades into building reputations, and neither can afford to appear weak. Any perceived disrespect, intentional or not, is treated as an attack, and in Dipset's world, Every attack is remembered and often retaliated against. He also delves into specific incidents that fueled tension. Moments that might seem small on the surface, a missed handshake, a studio disagreement, a cryptic comment in an interview, all of these add up over time. Budden explains how these minor incidents, when compounded over years, create a narrative that's nearly impossible to undo. But it's not just past grievances that matter. Budden explains that the beef is alive today because both Camron and Jim Jones continue to operate in overlapping spaces. The music industry has changed, but Dipset's influence in Harlem, NYC, and beyond remains strong, meaning their paths cross constantly. Every event, every show, every collaboration possibility becomes a potential trigger. Then there's the business side. Budden breaks down how financial stakes, brand influence, and legacy play into the feud. Dipset isn't just about music, it's a brand. And when brands clash, it's not just personal, it's professional. Decisions are measured not only against loyalty or respect, but also against potential consequences in the streets, the industry, and the fanbase. Budden emphasizes that some people expect reconciliation, but history suggests otherwise. In hip-hop, once trust is eroded, it's extremely difficult to rebuild. Even when both parties try to move past the beef, public perception and internal pressures can keep the conflict alive. Budden calls it a cycle that repeats itself, and it's exactly what Camron and Jim Jones have experienced for years. He also points to the interpersonal dynamics within the crew. Supporting members, collaborators, and affiliates play a huge role in either escalating or calming tensions. Budden notes that Jim Jones' close ties to certain artists and Camron's alliances create cross-currents, making any resolution more complicated. Finally, Budden drives home the psychological aspect. Years of public scrutiny, misinterpretation, and constant pressure wear on anyone. When you're a part of a legendary crew like Dipset, every action is analyzed, judged, and sometimes weaponized. Budden explains how both Camron and Jim Jones operate under this constant lens, which naturally fuels friction and prevents a clean resolution. And yet, despite the chaos, Budden isn't cynical. He highlights that this feud, in many ways, defines the culture. It's a story of loyalty, ambition, ego, and the harsh realities of navigating both the streets and the music industry. The drama might never end, but it teaches a larger lesson about how complex relationships in hip-hop really are. By the end of his breakdown, it's clear, this isn't just a feud for entertainment. It's a multi-layered conflict, influenced by history, reputation, ambition, ego, and the unrelenting eyes of fans and the streets. And as Budden says, the moment this understanding sinks in, you realize why Camron and Jim Jones' beef probably will never end, and why Dipset's legacy, complicated as it is, will always matter. As the years rolled on, the Camron and Jim Jones feud didn't just simmer, it smoldered beneath the surface, impacting everyone connected to Dipset. Budden explains that the public sees the highlights, the interviews, the social media jabs, the occasional diss track, but the real tension happens behind closed doors. One of the critical elements keeping this beef alive is loyalty. Jim Jones has always been protective of his crew, his street code, and the people he trusts. Camron, in contrast, has always had a bigger picture vision, an eye for branding, expansion, and influence. These differing priorities aren't inherently incompatible, but when they collide, conflict becomes inevitable. Budden points to specific incidents where minor disagreements became catalysts for renewed friction. For instance, a missed studio session, a subtle comment on social media, or even a perceived slight during a collaborative project could reignite old grudges. In Dipset culture, nothing is ever taken lightly. Even things that outsiders consider trivial can have lasting consequences. Street dynamics add another layer of complexity. Harlem is small but intensely connected. Everyone knows someone, and everyone remembers something. Budden notes that every action, public or private, is scrutinized. If Jim Jones feels disrespected, or if Camron believes loyalty has been compromised, word travels fast. And in hip-hop, reputation is everything. Another crucial factor Budden highlights is influence from other artists. Max B, Juelz Santana, Maudollery, and others have all played indirect roles, sometimes escalating tensions without even intending to. These affiliations, alliances, and rivalries act as pressure valves and catalysts, sometimes cooling the situation, other times making it volatile. Budden also dives into the role of media and commentary. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and interviews amplify the feud. Every clip, snippet, or reaction becomes fuel for speculation, often spinning narratives that may not be accurate. The public, hungry for drama, interprets these stories as definitive truth and, in turn, forces Camron and Jim Jones to respond, consciously or unconsciously. One of the most interesting points Budden makes is about ego and personal pride. In hip-hop, showing weakness is not an option, especially when you've built decades of credibility. Both Camron and Jim Jones are aware that any perceived concession could be seen as a loss of power. As a result, even when they may want to reconcile, pride often gets in the way, perpetuating the feud. Financial stakes are another unseen pressure. Dipset isn't just a musical group, it's a brand with influence in Harlem and beyond. Every project, every collaboration, every decision carries weight. A public disagreement can impact deals, sponsorships, and business relationships. Budden points out that these consequences often shape how each artist chooses to act, balancing personal pride against career-long strategy. Then there's the psychological toll. Being in a high-profile feud for years creates stress, mistrust, and heightened sensitivity. Every word, every glance, and every interaction is interpreted through a lens of suspicion. Budden explains how these psychological pressures can make even small disagreements explode into full-blown confrontations. Budden also discusses the impact on younger artists and affiliates. When a central figure like Jim Jones or Camron is involved in a prolonged feud, everyone around them feels the ripple effects. Associates must choose sides, and the stakes are rarely forgiven. Loyalty, Budden emphasizes, becomes a survival skill, and misalignment can be costly. An important insight Budden shares is about unresolved history. Many of the incidents that fueled the feud were never fully addressed or reconciled. This lack of closure creates a vacuum where speculation thrives, feeding narratives that neither side may have consciously initiated. Over time, these unresolved issues accumulate, making any peaceful resolution far more difficult. Budden also reflects on public perception versus private reality. The audience sees heated exchanges, cryptic posts, and dramatic interviews, but what actually happens behind the scenes can be far different. Sometimes, a disagreement is blown out of proportion because the narrative benefits someone else's agenda, whether that's a media outlet, a fellow artist, or even an affiliate. One of the most compelling points Budden makes is the role of timing. In hip-hop, timing can make or break a situation. A comment made during a heated interview, a track dropped during a sensitive period, or even a social media post timed incorrectly can escalate tensions in ways that weren't intended. He explains how timing has repeatedly reignited the Camron and Jim Jones feud, long after the original incident. Budden also explores the cultural weight of Harlem and Dipset's legacy. This isn't just personal, it's historical. Both artists carry the responsibility of representing their crew, their city, and their era. Missteps aren't just personal failures, they reflect on the entire network and influence the next generation of artists. This added pressure ensures that even small disagreements gain monumental significance. Another key factor is media misinterpretation and commentary. Each time a YouTube clip, podcast, or social media post surfaces, fans take sides and rumors spread faster than facts. Budden notes that this amplification forces both Camron and Jim Jones to address narratives they may not even recognize as true, creating a cycle that perpetuates the feud. Finally, Budden touches on the human element: ego, pride, loyalty, and emotion. At the core, this feud is fueled by personalities as much as history. Camron and Jim Jones are fiercely loyal, fiercely ambitious, and fiercely protective of their legacies. Combine that with decades of public scrutiny and high-stakes industry pressure, and you have a situation that's almost impossible to resolve completely. Budden concludes by noting that while fans hope for reconciliation, the reality is complex, layered, and ongoing. The feud will likely continue, not because either side wants to perpetuate drama, but because the intersections of loyalty, history, ego, and perception make it almost inevitable. And in a world where every action is watched and analyzed, peace requires more than intent. It requires a perfect alignment of circumstances, timing, and mutual respect. By the end of his breakdown, it's clear that this feud is about more than music. It's about legacy, identity, and survival. And in Budden's eyes, that's why Camron and Jim Jones' beef is far from over. After decades of tension, miscommunication, and public drama, the Camron and Jim Jones feud isn't just a storyline. It's a defining chapter in hip-hop history. Budden emphasizes that while fans focus on the surface-level clashes, the real story lies in how this conflict has shaped the culture, relationships, and legacy of Dipset. One of the most striking points Budden makes is that resolution is not simple. It's not just a matter of apologies or interviews. It's about decades of built-up trust being fractured, reputations being tested, and egos that can't easily bend. Even if both parties wanted to reconcile today, the cumulative weight of history would make it nearly impossible. Budden dives into specific fallout moments that define the modern perception of Dipset. From public confrontations to cryptic posts on social media, these incidents reinforce the notion of irreparable tension. Every fan debate, podcast discussion, or YouTube recap has fed into this narrative, turning a personal conflict into a public phenomenon. But it's not all negative. Budden points out that the feud has also highlighted loyalty, resilience, and the complexity of relationships in hip-hop. While outsiders see only conflict, insiders understand the unspoken rules: loyalty to your crew, protecting your brand, and navigating the streets with respect. These principles, though sometimes controversial, are what have maintained the Dipset legacy for so long. Another layer Budden explores is the psychological impact on both artists. Years of public scrutiny, constant commentary, and pressure from fans create stress and tension that extend beyond the music. Camron and Jim Jones operate in a high-stakes environment where every word and action is analyzed, making even minor disagreements feel monumental. Budden also discusses the ripple effect on the next generation of artists. Dipset's influence extends beyond their immediate crew. Young rappers look up to them as models of both success and caution. The feud, therefore, isn't just personal. It's educational, cautionary, and culturally significant, teaching the importance of loyalty, strategy, and awareness in the music industry. Business dynamics also play a role in prolonging the conflict. Dipset is more than a musical group. It's a brand with influence in Harlem, NYC, and the global hip-hop community. Financial considerations, sponsorships, collaborations, and legacy projects all intersect with personal relationships. Budden explains that these stakes make compromise risky because any misstep could damage not just personal pride, but years of work and reputation. Fans, social media, and commentary channels act as pressure amplifiers. Budden highlights that every cryptic tweet or snippet from a podcast can reignite tension, forcing Camron and Jim Jones to respond, whether they want or not. In many ways, the feud has grown beyond the individuals, becoming a symbol of Dipset's complexity and the intricate dynamics of the Harlem hip-hop scene. Interestingly, Budden points out moments when reconciliation seemed possible, but circumstances, timing, or external influences prevented it. Even neutral parties, well-meaning mediators, and supportive affiliates couldn't bridge the gap because the structural pressures of the feud were too strong. Loyalty, ego, public perception, and history all collide to keep the cycle alive. Budden also reflects on how public perception contrasts with private reality. The drama fans see online is just the tip of the iceberg. Behind closed doors, conversations, apologies, and negotiations happen that never reach the public eye. Yet, once a narrative is set, it gains momentum of its own, shaping fan opinion and industry reactions. A critical takeaway Budden emphasizes is that hip-hop isn't just about music. It's about identity, power, and legacy. Camron and Jim Jones' feud is a perfect example of how personal conflicts intersect with cultural influence, impacting careers, the community, and the next generation. Every move they make carries weight, and every misstep is magnified. Budden closes by examining the legacy of Dipset itself. Despite the drama, despite the beef, the crew's influence remains undeniable. The feud has shaped not only the individual careers of Camron and Jim Jones, but also the expectations and standards of Harlem hip-hop. New artists entering the scene witness this history and learn lessons about loyalty, ambition, and navigating complex relationships. Ultimately, Budden leaves viewers with one clear message: this beef likely will never end, but it's also part of a larger story, a story about friendship, betrayal, ambition, and the realities of building a legacy in hip-hop. And while fans may speculate endlessly, the truth is layered, nuanced, and ongoing. As the final words settle, one thing is clear: Camron and Jim Jones' feud is more than drama. It's a living, breathing part of hip-hop history. Dipset may be fractured in the eyes of the public, but its impact, influence, and lessons continue to reverberate through the streets of Harlem and the hearts of hip-hop fans worldwide. And that, according to Joe Budden, is why the story isn't just over, and why the world will keep watching every twist, turn, and confrontation for years to come. Before we wrap this up, let me ask you, what do you think is really going on between Camron and Jim Jones? Are they ever going to squash this feud, or is Dipset destined to stay divided forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because I want to hear your take on this drama. Don't hold back. Every opinion counts, and this is the place where the real discussions happen. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Dipset feud, make sure you smash that like button. Everything helps us bring you more exclusive breakdowns, behind-the-scenes stories, and street-level insights you won't see anywhere else. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss when we drop the next explosive update on Camron, Jim Jones, and all the Harlem chaos that's shaking the hip-hop world. Also, share this video with your friends who are obsessed with hip-hop beefs, Dipset history, or just love to watch drama unfold, because trust me, they're going to want to see every word Budden said. And keep your eyes peeled for our Dipset deep dive, where we'll go even further into hidden stories, unseen footage, and insider reactions that could change the way you see this legendary feud. Remember, this isn't just about gossip. It's about the truth behind the scenes, the legacy of Dipset, and the lessons the streets teach us about loyalty, respect, and ego. So comment, like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the Dipset drama is far from over, and we'll be right here bringing you every shocking detail.